Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Centra, I'm sipping on an Americano, and the subject of our talk today is Ivern, the Green Father. Ivern is one of League's most innovative champions ever released. The controller jungler, the pacifist, that is what makes Ivern such a special case. To start, I'm going to go over Ivern's lore and his developers' insights on designing him. Then, I'll go through his patch history as a League champion, show you the highlights, and talk about why some of these changes were made. Finally, I'll give an overview of Ivern's gameplay design using the 5 pillars as a guide: gameplay satisfaction, thematic resonance, skill expression, gameplay fairness, and uniqueness. Alright, without further ado, let's get right into it. To get a pulse on Ivern's thematic, we must first look at his lore, and it is quite the story to tell. Ivern was once a proud Freljordian conqueror, Ivern the Cruel. This great, human Viking lord refused to kneel before the might of the Three Sisters, so he sailed out to discover a new land for himself to claim. In doing so, he and his crew were the first humans to discover Ionia, the First Lands, and they were met with relentless onslaught from the native Vastaya. The humans and the Vastaya battled, and as it raged, Ivern found the God Willow, the great source of natural magic that made Ionia, well, Ionia. To break the Vastayan's spirit, he chopped down the God Willow, but this caused the God Willow to explode so violently that Ivern the Cruel ceased to exist. Instead, the God Willow fused with his body and soul. When Ivern awoke, he witnessed the aftermath of the battle, but not the mere blood and death. He watched the mushrooms, the maggots, the ferns, and the flowers all grow from the bones and carcasses, and to him, this was such a beautiful sight, the sight of life persisting in nearly every form imaginable, that he cried. Now, Ivern roams Runeterra as a benevolent and kind, if a bit strange, tree man, who wants to meet every creature, every plant, and every rock, and he wants to teach humanity to give back to the world that they so selfishly take from. Reading from Ivern's Champion Insights, authored by Riot Cactopus, the goal from the beginning was to make a champion that saw League differently and had appealed to a friendlier demographic. Quote, "In League, everybody is trying to kill everybody else. Despite their personalities or backstories, champs are all really on the rift to do one thing: drain some health bars. So what if we made a nice guy, one who, no matter where he is, just wants to do something super sweet, like save all the animals?" That is Ivern. Now, of course, League of Legends is a game where champions come together to fight, so they ensured that Ivern could bring something to the table when it came to team combat. But a lot of Ivern's attack methods are indirect. A lot of Ivern's damage is localized into his summon, Daisy, who is controlled by the Ivern player, but ultimately, Ivern isn't attacking you, Daisy is. Similarly, Ivern's best numerical value in a firefight is his shields, to prevent his team from dying, not damage or even offensive buffs, at least not on his release. Furthermore, Brushmaker lets Ivern deter enemy attacks with powerful vision control, giving his allies a safe haven to hide away in, or keeping enemies guessing about Ivern's positioning. Put simply, Ivern is a tree hugger, not a tree fighter, but he still holds power as a force of nature, and his team can use the gifts of the forest to their advantage to still win their battles. Okay, so Riot figured out his story and general theme, but how does that reflect in his gameplay? What gameplay changes has Ivern received over the years? Ivern has somehow managed to get so many huge changes, and yet stay exactly the same. This champion's patch history is just one huge list of changes after another, and it's usually some new effect being added, or old effect being completely removed. For instance, let's just look at old Ivern and see what's different. Starting with his passive, the entire first part is still mostly the same. He spends some health and mana to make a little circle of happiness, and then when the circle finishes after some time, he can click on them to free the camp and get all the XP and money. Smiting finishes the circle immediately, yada yada yada. However, old Ivern had a full section about how at level 5 onwards, when he freed red or blue buff, he duplicated the buff for a teammate to pick up. We saw this removed here in patch 13.11, along with a laundry list of other changes, but I digress. What else was different about old Ivern? Well, he was a melee champion. He started with 125 attack range, which is the same as Akali, but after unlocking Brushmaker, whenever Ivern stood in a bush, his attack range increased to 450, which is the same as Vladimir. Ivern's Q, Root Collar, is the most similar ability to today's, but it's gotten a lot of bug fixes and interaction changes. He shoots out his projectile and roots the first enemy that it hits. Seems super simple, right? But if Ivern, or one of his teammates, clicks on the rooted champion, they dash towards that champion into their auto attack range. This second part of the ability is what gets changed the most, especially because Ivern was literally the one and only character in the whole game that can change his auto attack range from pure melee to pure ranged. Oh my gosh. Okay, Ivern's W is Brushmaker, which spawns a little bush where he clicks. As mentioned earlier, these bushes used to give Ivern increased attack range, it's his passive, but this was removed when they made him a ranged champion. It also gave Ivern increased magic damage on his basic attacks, but not his teammates. Giving teammates magic damage on their attacks was added a lot later, so before, this was that ability that non-Ivern players viewed as worthless flavor. The kind of thing where Ivern already has a lot of value from the passive portion of it, so the active is a silly throwaway spell. However, the very best Iverns in the world know what this spell is capable of, and is viewed as the final test of becoming an Ivern one-trick. Ivern's E is decently similar to modern Ivern's. You place a shield on a person, that then explodes after 2 seconds, dealing magic damage in an AoE and slowing enemies around the target. The biggest difference between this ability at launch and now is that the ability shields the ally a second time if it explodes and doesn't hurt any enemies, which is a massive amount of shielding for this character to give out, by the way. Finally, we landed Daisy, his ultimate ability. Ivern calls a golem to assist him. Her name is Daisy. Say hi! Hi, Daisy. Ivern can direct Daisy to attack enemies for him, and if she attacks an enemy 3 times in a row, her next attack will cause an eruption from the ground to knock up all enemies in a line. There are so many little things that are different about Daisy now that old Daisy may as well be an entirely different ability. For starters, we have the classic pet jankiness that has been ironed out over the years, from terrible targeting and control, to the pet changes that allowed Daisy to apply on-spell hit effects like Leandri's Torment Burn, to silly little game-breaking bugs, like Daisy accidentally stealing Dragon from her own team and not letting her team get the buff or any gold. It doesn't end there though, because Daisy also used to have insanely high health regeneration. Like, nowadays, Daisy regenerates 2.5 health per second, which includes during combat, which is cool, but out of combat, old Daisy regenerated 3% of her max health per second. Furthermore, her attack speed, armor, and magic resist scaled with Ivern's AP, which made mage items super efficient. Overall, this was one of League's most experimental kits out there, and I'd say it was mostly a success. His abilities to duplicate buffs was very thematically fitting and flavorful, and it doubled as compensation for being an enchanter without direct ally stat buffs. Root Collar made him an astonishingly good catcher, as the dash made ally follow-up much easier. And even though most players didn't know about it, it was integrated well enough that most allies would activate it when it was helpful for them anyway. Daisy also helped Ivern out a lot in solo queue, since Daisy can use all of Ivern's abilities. So if you don't have a very effective carry on your team, Ivern can resort to shielding Daisy and rooting the targets that he needs to focus down, especially if Ivern was going a high AP build. Even so, this Ivern has problems, and of course they did. After all, why would Ivern be so different today if he was perfect back then? Firstly, Daisy, like mentioned before, was insanely buggy. Sometimes she'd glitch out and just teleport around, go invisible, and her targeting was god-awful, sometimes dropping attack commands entirely. And Brushmaker, oh boy Brushmaker. There has never been an ability like Brushmaker before Ivern, nor has there been one since. Because of this, so few people understand the value of this ability, let alone how to execute it well, and sadly, poor usage of it could be punished by the enemy team taking control of your brushes and using them against Ivern's team. This massively exacerbated the disparity between Ivern's skill floor and skill ceiling, going from, oh yeah, that's a really difficult champion to master, to players who don't know what they're doing are actively throwing for trying to use him. Oh, and also the auto attack range thing? Just, why? Why did he have this? Just make him ranged, what? Anyway, there have been a lot of balance changes and adjustments, great and small, between Ivern's release and his Midscope update, but I'll just show you the biggest and most significant highlights. Patch 9.6 saw a big buff to pets, where their attacks now apply on-spell hit effects, like Leandri's Torment, and Daisy was included in these. Patch 9.20, Ivern became a range champion, with his attack range becoming 475 and Brushmaker no longer giving him increased attack range. However, this caused problems where Ivern couldn't shield himself and dash into shield popping range with his Q anymore, so in patch 9.21, just one patch later, Ivern's Root Collar now dashes him to his old melee attack range. Lastly, in patch 11.24, Ivern's golden experience that he gained from Krugs got giga buffed, because Krugs were changing at the time where the big Krugs were getting nerfed to the XP and gold that they gave, and the tiny Krugs got more. Ivern's passive only looked at the XP and gold that the big Krugs gave, so Ivern just got less and less golden experience. All I'll say on this is that this hugely impacted how Ivern played, because before this buff, Ivern players just told each other to stop bothering with doing Krugs. He couldn't even hit level 4 on his first full clear anymore because the experience was just that sad. The buff increased the value that Ivern got from Krugs by more than 2.5 times, so yeah, he can do Krugs again. Anyway, we finally land at Ivern's biggest line of changes, his Midscope update. Okay, there is so much here. Oh my goodness. Okay. Ivern can no longer create a copy of the red and blue buff after level 5, largely because it became a global jungle mechanic. Ivern's Root Collar got 50 more range, and 4 new mechanics added to it. Recasting the ability now dashes Ivern on top of the rooted enemy. Clicking the rooted enemy instead dashes him to his attack range. Daisy now dashes to rooted minions, and Root Collar refunds 50% of its cooldown if it damages a non-epic monster. Brushmaker's cooldown got massively buffed to a 20-second recharge rate flat, rather than a 40 to 24-second recharge rate scaling with ability level. The vision that the bush grants on spawn increased from 3 to 8 seconds. The duration of the bushes also went up 15 more seconds. They now despawn if ally vision of the bush is lost, and allies now get additional on-hit magic damage if they enter the bush, scaling with Ivern's AP. Oh my god, I'm still not done. Ivern's Trigger Seed now applies a second shield onto a shielded ally if it explodes without damaging an enemy, and Jesus Christ, Daisy, okay, alright. Higher attack range, higher movement speed, better base attack speed, health regeneration, that works in combat, increased base damage on slam, smarter AI, and Daisy can now apply on-hit effects like Lichbane. Holy wow, okay, let's see what the devs had to say about these changes. With buff sharing becoming a part of the game this patch, we wanted to offer Ivern some buffs to the rest of his kit in exchange for removing his unique mechanic. Overall, these changes shouldn't be too transformative, but his base spells should feel better in almost every situation they're cast in. Ivern's Q will be able to reach between most camps on both sides of the map, and Daisy should feel a lot more responsive with faster attacks and move speed. If you go through the change list, you'll quickly realize that this isn't the Midscope we promised for Ivern. The reason we've decided to not give Ivern a Midscope this patch is because player feedback around our proposed Midscope was indicating we were on the wrong track, and internally we just didn't feel like the designs were hitting the quality bar to ship. So for now, we're offering Ivern some buffs that will help him become a healthier tree until he's ready for a transplant. For starters, there were supposed to be even more changes here than what we got, like Daisy knocking enemies up on cast, but many of the changes, that were mostly nerfs, got pared down to this. Now, this list seems to be focused on giving Ivern a ton of buffs to compensate for the removal of his unique buff duplication mechanic. If you read a lot deeper into this, there's more going on than what meets the eye, but as someone who's honestly not that good at Ivern, I couldn't decipher it immediately. Thankfully, I stumbled upon a useful website called Ivern.io, which is a blogging page for a Grandmaster in Ivern one trick with a screen named Garbo, and they had some very wise insights into the changes. To start, they hate the changes, for a couple of reasons. They didn't say that there were any problems with his passive or Q, but they covered the W, E, and R extensively. I'll leave a link to the article below if you want to read the details, but to paraphrase, this Midscope update removed a lot of Ivern's interactivity and counterplay, and dumbed down a lot of the technical parts of his kit, like good bush placement and managing Daisy. Since bushes now despawn when your team can't see inside of them, he needs a lot of voids to keep them up for their full duration now. More importantly though, the enemy team gets basically no reward for trying to take control of the bushes anymore, which de-incentivizes fighting entirely. As for Daisy, her higher attack speed, range, and movement speed took her from being difficult to kite turned impossible if Ivern was giving her slows and roots, to just impossible to kite, period. And her knockups land a lot more often without micromanaging her, which is great for Ivern's team, but strips a lot of means for the enemy to counter Daisy. Remember, Daisy's knockup is a 3-hit passive for her. She can do it multiple times in a fight and it hits in a line AoE. Overall, Ivern's value before was potentially high, but required balancing your resources and executing everything correctly to maximize it. Now, Ivern just gets too much teamfight value for free. Now, I understand and sympathize with Garbo's takes on the Ivern changes, but I want to focus less on whether the changes were good or bad for Ivern, and more on the logic behind the changes and what the designer's goals seem to be. Garbo's response happens to also be very helpful for this too, as the answers seem to be 1. Make it easier for new players to get value with Ivern, and 2, and this one sounds like a bad thing, but remove some of Ivern's counterplay. Usually the problem players have with a champion is that they have no counterplay. That is to say, they are uninteractive. There aren't many actions that the person playing against a certain character can take to shut them down, and that's a bad thing. However, very, very rarely we see a champion with too much counterplay. If at any point in the game, even when the champion should be strongest, the enemy team can somewhat reliably stop them from succeeding, then that champion lacks agency. The best example I can find of a champion like this is Vel'Koz. In patch 14.1, they added a travel time to his knockup so that it comes out a lot faster when used at close range. This was because Vel'Koz was so squishy, so immobile, and had no immediate defense. All he had was raw damage and some CC, but you could dodge most of the damage. That's a case of too much counterplay, so they cut it a bit to give Vel'Koz some more reliable self-peel so he has some agency. Similarly, in Ivern's case, the devs may have believed that he had already had a lot of weaknesses that could be exploited. Some weaknesses that come to mind are being an enchanter who's too shield reliant, so Serpent's Fang counters him, also being an enchanter with no buff in his base kit, so scaling isn't as effective as a support enchanter, also being a jungler with a slow clear, slow objective times, iffy dueling, and relying hard on a buggy AI pet that's too slow to reliably knock up anything, and to top it off, having one of the most complex and difficult to master abilities in the whole game that can also sabotage your own team when used poorly. This isn't even to say that I wholeheartedly agree with the Midscope. For instance, I agree with Garbo that Trigger Seed's change is concerning. Not even die-hard shield spam supports, like Karma and Sona, have a 100% shield uptime, and for good reason. I also understand that I'm not a Grandmaster or Challenger League player. Bushes just aren't as effective in my elo because my allies don't know how to work with them. While in Grandmaster, Ivern can grind lanes to a halt by planting some grass under their turret and pretending to help while farming camps. With that being said, I fully understand why the Midscope happened. Now, with that out of the way, there have been some big balance patches since 13.11, but otherwise, this is more or less the Ivern of today. So how does he hold up? For starters, Ivern fits his theme to a T. I do sincerely miss when he gave red and blue buff to his teammates, as that was something that felt perfect for Ivern's thematic, but putting that aside, everything works in his favor. From his roaming, jolly nature, to his pacifistic approach towards taking jungle camps, all the way down to how he uses some of his best tools to deter enemies from fighting rather than focusing on hard combat scenarios. It's just perfect. Additionally, Ivern is truly one of a kind. Not only is he the only playable jungle enchanter in the entire game, he is also the only champion in the game with such strong vision control and manipulation. Vision manipulation is a very powerful tool in League, especially at high ranks, and Brushmaker is such a fitting tool that I couldn't imagine it working on anyone else. If that wasn't enough, his skill expression is very, very high. Ivern's kit lets him take a completely unique approach to the rest of the macro game, while Daisy keeps him busy during fights when paired with the rest of what Ivern is expected to do. Shield the right person, land the root, hold the root because Daisy is pressuring backline and root will drag her off, throw up a bush for buffs, you know, the works. Even with all the extra time that Ivern gets from his camps farming themselves, there is just no shortage of things to do as Ivern, which makes him really fun. Now, for Ivern's design flaws, there's only one I can think of. Ivern is so unintuitive to a standard League of Legends player that even proficient players need a guide to figure him out. A player may pick Ivern because they love his thematic and vibe, only to be met with a wonky passive where he can't even attack jungle monsters, a route that sometimes causes him to dash into melee range and get him killed, and a bush ability that does nothing. A new Ivern player that reaches late game will just mash their buttons but really only feel the value from his shield and maybe Daisy, and that will probably turn them off. This has resulted in Ivern's player base being very niche, meaning a community of few dedicated mains rather than numerous players. There's just no joy in learning a character that you don't find fun, but you can't find the fun in Ivern if you don't learn him first. In conclusion, I think that Ivern is a fantastically designed champion that's often a victim of circumstance. Like I said, he's one of a kind. There is no other champion in this game that plays like jungler Ivern, but that also means that his player base is very isolated. Most players don't want to expend the energy to figure out League of Ivern, and that's okay. There's still a dedicated player base that loves him for what he is, and they don't seem to be leaving anytime soon. Oh wow, that was a lot bigger than my last video, huh? I'm surprised that I knocked that out so fast, though, to be fair, I really love Ivern, so that might have something to do with it. Don't expect my next video to be out as fast as this one was, by the way. My summer class starts this week, and I haven't even locked in who I'll be doing next. Speaking of which, if you want me to talk about someone, tell me in the comments. I play mostly everyone at least a little bit, and I have no issue with learning about someone out of my comfort zone. Okay, I gotta go. I have D&D in 5 minutes. Bye!